Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. The first item of business is declaration of conflict of interest. Is there any members on council that has any conflicts or pecuniary interest to declare before we commence? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. The agenda before you, there's one deletion. Item 12.1 is stricken from the agenda today. So there'll only be the CAO report in closed session. And could I get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor Lloyd, discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay. And then we have the regular council meeting minutes of May 27, 2019. How do you find them? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. I'll move those minutes as presented or circulated.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. So now we have 4.1, and so just this is a regular meeting of council, so therefore there won't be any questions and answer during any of the presentations. And if the media wants, after we're done our regular council meeting, the presenters or myself can make ourselves available. I don't have an approximate time, but then we're also doing the ribbon cutting, sod turning at the RCMP, so there'll be also time to talk there as well if you're out there as well. So whatever works best for you, that would be good. And before I turn the presentation over to administration, I just want to take a second. I need to take an opportunity to set the record straight, because at the end of the delegation regarding the high school site at the May 27th meeting, I was asked a question if council's decision was final, and I mistakenly answered no. After the meeting, my council colleagues reminded me that our November 26, 2018 meeting, the 2019-2021 capital budget was passed, and that document named Site A as the location for the proposed high school site recreation site. The recreation center is to be funded by the town, while the funding for the high school needs to be approved by the government of Alberta. Therefore, the future of the new school is not certain until a funding announcement is made. I apologize for misspeaking and for any confusion my response may have caused. And now I'll turn it over to administration. Thank you.
That I've heard the live. I guess I don't need to be at this meeting. You've known since November, and you've lied and lied. Very dis-
been gathered for different purposes by different departments over the past number of years. It took considerable time to distill the information down to a manageable presentation size and to sew the different pieces together to form the comprehensive report that's before you. Before diving into the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the attendance of a couple of external stakeholders. We've got Pete Barely from CP Rail. He's their Senior Manager of Projects and Public Works for Western Canada. So, hello, Pete. Joining him from CP Rail is Paul Whalen, the Western Grade Crossing Coordinator from CP Rail. In attendance, we also have Dexter Durfee, the Secretary-Treasurer of Palliser Regional Schools. So, thank you, gentlemen, for making the effort to join us here today. If we can go to the next slide on the PowerPoint. Sorry, that's the staff report. The PowerPoint, slide number 2. All right, great. So as you can see from the table of contents on the screen before you, a number of topics will be addressed during this presentation. We'll have an introduction that looks at Coaldale in the context of other municipalities in the province of Alberta who have the presence of railways and highways bisecting them. We'll also have some remarks from CP Rail on rail safety, the infrastructure funding opportunities that they've been assisting us with, as well as some statistics on the number and length of trains that pass through Coaldale. We'll have an emergency services overview conducted by our fire chief on behalf of the fire department that looks at emergency response in the context of the northwest side of Coaldale, as well as the different intersectional options they have to access that site. We will provide a historical timeline of the different aspects of this project. We'll look at our growth history in the context of annexation, the public engagement and communication efforts leading up to and following the annexation process. Same with the recreation center and the opportunity presented to us by Palliser for a new high school. We'll look at the infrastructure and servicing logistics associated with the northwest side of Coaldale and how those costs and logistics compare to that of the other sites that were looked at. And then we'll look at the financial and economic impacts of the site on the northwest part of Coaldale and how that compares with the economic and financial impact of the other sites that were considered. Okay. All right, next slide, please. So the first thing that we're going to look at is Coaldale in the context of other communities. So before getting into the details of the Joint High School Multi-Use Recreation Project, we've taken a step back and analyzed the infrastructure layout of Coaldale and compared it to that of other municipalities in Alberta. The purpose of this exercise was to ascertain the extent to which the presence of a railway and highway through Coaldale was unique. It was also an opportunity for us to see how other communities have managed growth around both sides of highways and railways. So before we get into the first example, which is the town of Canmore, it should just be pointed out that Coaldale is a community similar to 45 other communities in the province of Alberta. What we looked at is every community in Alberta, and communities with a population in excess of 1,000 people were communities that we looked at. How many of those are like Coaldale in the province of Alberta? And there are 45 communities that have a highway and railway that pass through town. And in each of these communities, there are amenities and population, residential populations on either side of the highway and railway. So in the 10 examples we've looked at, there wasn't time to go through all 45. What we did on the map here is we identified where you see in yellow in the arrow the presence of the highway. The checkered line in red that shows the footprint of the railway. The areas shaded in blue, those numbered boxes represent the locations of the schools in those communities. The boxes that are in orange with the letters represent the location of recreation centers. And then what we did for each one is what is the proximity of those amenities relative to the railway and the highway. So on these maps, you'll see the distance from these sites in meters and their proximity to the rail and the highway. We also looked at the train count and the highway counts for the highways and the railways, as well as the population distributions, like how many people live on, either side of the railway. So in the first example here, we see the town of Canmore. There's 4 schools located on different sides of the railway. You can see the letter B there. That is a location of their indoor swimming pool complex, which is about 50 meters away from the railway that's there. We've also marked the fire department. So you can see in that red box right next to the daily train count box. That's the location of the fire department headquarters in Canmore. Looking at train counts, there's 22 to 27 trains that pass through Canmore on a daily basis, along with a highway traffic count of about 41,700. 46% of people live on the north east side of the highway, and 54% live on the southwest part of the highway. So just looking at Canmore, what have they done? You can see in the picture there, it's a close-up of the road rail intersection. You can see it's a 4-lane roadway there, and then the crossing arms provided there when a train comes through. So that's the town of Canmore. The next example we have there is the town of Okotoks. As you can see from the map, the blue boxes with numbers, there's 9 schools scattered on various sides of the rail and the highway. What's interesting about the town of Okotoks is that the railway bisects the center of town, and there's 5 schools, along with 44% of the population south of the tracks, and then 4 schools and a rec center on the north side of the tracks. So given the size of the community, there are 2 fire stations, but this kind of provides the lay of the land. In terms of average daily, train count, there's 13 to 18 that would go through and utilize the tracks in the town of Okotoks. The next sample we looked at was the town of Ponoka. There are 2 highways and a railway in this case. Although there aren't any current schools on the east side of the railway, this is an area slated for additional growth and development, and there will likely be amenities that follow on that side of town. So you can see the distribution there. Their train counts are a bit lower than Canmore and Okotoks. There's between 9 and 14 that would go through Ponoka on a 24-hour period. And then you can see the location and the traffic count of the 2 highways marked there in yellow. The next example is the town of Stony Plain. They've got 6 schools located throughout the community on multiple sides of the railways and highways. They have an average daily traffic or train count of 25 to 28, so that is significantly higher than some of the other communities we looked at, and certainly higher than the town of Coaldale. But you can see from the map there the location and the proximity from the school rec centers to the highway and rail infrastructure. The next example is the town of Vegreville. As you can see on the map there, the railway and highway bisect the center of Vegreville, with 46% of the population falling on the north side of the railway and 54% on the southwest side. The fire department is located on the top left-hand corner of the screen. You can see there with the Vegreville example. Their train count is right on par with that of the town of Coaldale, with an average of 6 to 10 trains that pass through each day. And then you can see, again, a close-up there on the image in that circle, a blow-up or close-up of what that intersection looks like near that highway. We've used a larger scale example. The city of Airdrie is what is on the next slide here. The biggest takeaway from this comparator is that there are schools located on multiple sides of the railways and highways. I think the diagrams, the locations kind of show you that there's quite a diverse distribution of educational infrastructure throughout all sides of the community. The next slide is the town of Didsbury. In the town of Didsbury, the rail and highway run in perpendicular fashion. Schools are located on either side of the rail, and this rail has a higher average count than the town of Coaldale, with about 14 to 19 trains that would pass through the town of Didsbury in a 24-hour period. You can see A, that is the location of the recreation facility, which is 80 meters in proximity from their railway. The next example we have there, this is the town of Innisfail. As you can see, there are 5 schools and 2 highways. There's an average daily train count of 14 to 19. In the case of Innisfail, you can see that a lot of the schools are clustered in a central location, but there is a large population base on the other side of the railway. Their population distribution is about 32% west of the rail and 68% east of the rail. Getting closer to our region, we're back in southern Alberta here. This is a map of the town of Bow Island. It's the same railway that passes through Coaldale. Interestingly, all of the schools and the recreational facility in Bow Island are on the north side of the rail. The other part that's, I think, an important takeaway is that the fire department is actually on the south side of the rail when the schools and rec center are on the north side of the rail. There's about a 2/3, 1/3 population distribution in Bow Island, where 63% of residents in Bow Island live on the north side of the rail, and then 37% live on the south portion of the rail. Our neighbors in the town of Tabor, this is almost a mere reverse image of the infrastructure layout of the town of Coaldale, with one notable exception. You'll see number 8 on the bottom of the screen. That is an elementary school on the south side of the rail and Highway 3 passing through Tabor. There are about 1,800 people who live on the south side of the highway and the railway in the town of Tabor, which is about 22% of the population. So the population distribution in Tabor, it's about 78% to the north, 22% to the south. And then that brings us to our hometown, the town of Coaldale. So you can see on the map here, I think we're all familiar with this, there are 6 educational centers that are located on the south side of the highway, leaving the north side of Coaldale, which is about 23% of the population, with no current educational or recreational amenities. And as confirmed by CP Rail, there's an average daily train count of 6 to 10 trains. You can see where the highway's marked there, as well as in the purple on the northwest corner, the school rec center footprint there. And I think the important takeaway is when you compare the layout of the town of Coaldale with that of the town of Tabor, while our population distributions are fairly equal in terms of a percentage, the distribution of schools and recreational amenities aren't as balanced as they are in the town of Tabor. They're not as balanced as they are in the town of Coaldale. Right now, there are currently no educational or recreational facilities on the north side of the rail and highway in Coaldale. So that brings us to a bit of a summary slide. I know I went through that at a fairly quick pace, but this kind of puts into context the numbers, the train counts, the traffic counts, and the population distribution of Coaldale, marked there in the orange shading. How does that compare to 10 of the sample sizes that we looked at? Again, there are 45 communities in the province of Alberta that are over 1,000 people. That's 40% of the entire urban municipalities in the province of Alberta that have a rail and highway that bisect their community. So this provides a little bit more context for the number of train counts. We are well below the provincial average. You can see the number of vehicles per day, the width of our highway. It's right on point with average. The final takeaway that I'd like to point out with the table here is that Coaldale, while our population distribution, it's not as balanced as that of a lot of other communities. The one thing that's different from Coaldale compared to the other communities we looked at is that they've got schools and recreational facilities on multiple sides of their highways and railway, and Coaldale does not, even though we have a fairly large comparative population mass on that side of town. On the next slide. So we looked at, in that last exercise, what does Coaldale look like today? The purpose of this slide is what could Coaldale look like tomorrow? So what you see on the slide here in the green boxes, that represents the lands annexed into the town of Coaldale. That was approved back in April 1st, 2018, even though the annexation process began back as early as 2014. So this is the approved annexation map, as well as population projections based on those areas slated for growth. So we looked at previously the distribution north-south in Coaldale, And in 10, 15, 20 years, this is what the town of Coaldale could look like as growth and development occurs on both sides of the highway. So on the north side, there will be possibly another 3,000 to 4,000 people. You can see in the checkered line, again, that's the 20-acre site that's been set aside for the joint high school rec center. So the 18 to 2,000 people that live on the north, you can add a couple thousand there based on the projections, our annexation request, and the growth trend for Coaldale to show how 2,000 can become 5,000 as our town continues to boom. There will also be an additional, I should note, 6,000 people to the south. So all things considered, say we fast forward 20 years from now, you do see a population distribution of 30 to 35% to the north and 65 to 70% to the south. And that would put us a lot closer to our municipal comparators that we looked at. The next slide, what it's done is marked all of the intersections that are in both inside the town of Coaldale, urban boundaries. There are 4, as well as the 2 intersections on the east and west sides of Coaldale that are currently in Lethbridge County. So there's 6 intersections that you see on the map here. What we've done is marked the distance between each of those 6 intersections on the map. And what we're hoping to do is call up our guests from CP Rail to come up and talk a bit about rail safety, train frequency, and train lengths, as well as the safety infrastructure funding opportunities that they've been assisting the town of Coaldale with. So I'll let these gentlemen sit down, and then I'll reintroduce them again. Okay, so in the black shirt on my right, we've got Pete Barley. He's the Senior Manager of Projects and Public Works for Western Canada for CP Rail. And then joining him on my left in the blue shirt is Paul Whalen, and he's CP Rail's Western Grade Crossing Coordinator. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming to the meeting today.
No, thanks for having us. I guess, if I could, as a starting point, could we go back to the slide that has the summary, kind of the summary of the communities? So I had to chuckle a little bit when I saw this, just because of the sheer number of projects, and it actually speaks to some of what we're doing here as well. Sheer number of projects that we have as we go through this, and just how important CP takes rail safety. We understand the project that you have. We have been working with your team for probably, I don't know, the last 6 to 8 months. Previously, we've worked with the team here at Coaldale on whistle cessation and other initiatives. But nobody takes railway safety more seriously than CP Rail. We know that Mike Lavecchio's been out here. I sat with him one time, not in the not too distant past, speaking to all the different initiatives that we have around railway safety. I'm hoping that the person from your emergency services will also talk to some of the things we have in terms of the applications, that let you know what type of, what's in the different containers. But to the actual safety with, when we talk about kids, different things at the railway, what we find the most important things are, one, to give good access. That prevents a lot of the trespassing and people using alternatives. And the other is education. And I'll talk to a little bit of that as well. So, as I say, when I look through the list that you had here, when we look at the city of Airdrie, they have right now a pedestrian culvert that they use for pedestrians, pathways, that they had put in probably 15 to 20 years ago. Unfortunately, it's a little bit low, so that fills with water and ice and often isn't used and results in trespassing. We're working with them right now at putting a new pedestrian underpass in, or culvert, to help pedestrians get through more safely. Bow Island we worked with in the last couple of years, using the Transport Canada Rail Safety Improvement Program to update at least 2 crossings with flashing lights, bells and gates, because we knew those were important. School routes and used by school buses. Canmore, actually the very picture that you had up, we're improving the pedestrian access there. As you know, they get a ton of tourist traffic. So again, working with them to improve that. Okotoks, much the same, and I could go on and on. What we've actually looked at here, as you said, we have an average, and the way we talk about it is annual average daily traffic of 6 trains at 5,200 feet in length. The 10 would be an absolute max. At a high point, we might have had a blockage somewhere, and so we're moving more trains at the time. But on average, you're only going to see 6 trains per day coming through the town here. That's at a speed of roughly 40 miles an hour. Now, one of the things that we've been working with your team on is at 30th Street, providing improved pedestrian access. That would include flashing lights, bells, gates for pedestrians, a pedestrian pathway. One of the things that we can look at, and one of the things I should probably talk to, is something called the Rail Safety Improvement Program. That's a program run by Transport Canada. And what they do is look at improving safety at crossings throughout the nation. And they will contribute up to 50% of the cost of those improvements. We've had good success in other communities tapping into those funds. So that's something that we've offered to do here, is help submit that application to Transport Canada and try to get the funding for the project that we're looking at there. The other place that we do that, we are working with your team. They've talked about potential pedestrian overpass. I've had good success in Salmon Arm, securing funding through the RCIP program there. It's up to a maximum of roughly $500,000 for these types of projects. And as I say, I've had success doing that in the past. So that's something that we're working with them as well. I think, again, when I talk about education as a way, some of the other things we could look at, one thing I forgot, is fencing. We will want to, look at some type of fencing to prevent people from going across. Community of Cochrane, we applied and successfully received 50% of the funding to fence the entire railway corridor to clean things up there. So, the rail safety improvement funding is obviously something we're looking at for the different initiatives here. The other thing that we often look at is education. So we recently had a project in the city of Leduc. They were looking at whistle cessation at a couple of crossings that were right near the schools. And we immediately objected because we didn't want kids walking through there or going through the pathways, because what we find, the way that community is situated, all the homes back onto the railway right-of-way. And so all their gates are open in the back. And so what we assumed what's happening is that kids were coming through onto our right-of-way and then up into the schools. And one of the best tools that we have in our toolbox, if people aren't using the crossings, is our whistles, because we blow before we get to the crossing. So we objected to that. We actually went out to the community and we stood off to the side as casual observers and watched what was happening. And what we found was that all the kids were using the crossing. There was nobody going through there. It was completely overgrown. There was no way you could, and there was no signs of trespassing. So we started talking to some of the kids, and it was education through school. And in fact, we worked with them there on a program where all the kids designed posters talking to railway safety, use your crossing. And we got out there with them with our CP police and had those posters that they had created themselves put up at the crossings. And just that type of education got people thinking about railway safety and how they were going to use those crossings, and works really well at the schools. And we offer different programs through our Community Connect where we'll come talk to the schools. Our CP police will come talk to the schools. And the same thing, if we find that people are trespassing in the right-of-way and it's in a dangerous way, then we ask our CP police to visit those areas as well. So on that, some of the other things that we do to make the crossing safe, if there is an incident at a crossing, you will notice that whether it's just crossbucks, which are just the crossbucks that you see, or if we have a signalized crossing, there is always on both sides of the crossing a sticker that gives our 1-800 emergency number. And that number takes you right through to our what is essentially our operations center through our CP police, so that we can talk to our train crews and let them know if there's something happening at one of the crossings. Paul, I don't know if you want to talk to some of the other operations.
Beyond that's the first signage that we have for people that are using the crossing that may have an emergency, as well as the trains have to whistle their horns at each whistle post approaching the crossing, as well as the train crews. If they see an obstruction, they have to blow their horns for that obstruction to warn everybody away. And depending on the weight and the speed of the train, they can come to a controlled halt after that. If we're talking about an emergency situation, if there's a breakdown of the train or a sudden event, the train crew will get out and study what is going on and make a judgment call And after that, their next priority is to clear the crossings. And of course, 911 would have if they were at a crossing, it's our priority to clear that crossing as soon as possible.
So we can do that a couple of ways. Sorry, we can actually break our train, opening up the crossing, or if we're able to, we would move the train right off the crossing. That's kind of it for...
To the next slide where it shows the next one, the intersectional spacing. Would you be able to comment briefly on train lengths? And we looked at the frequency and train length in the context of our crossings and the distances between them.
So I think given current train lengths, and again, this is what we consider our secondary main. So we're on our main track, we're starting to grow to 10,000. We're 8,500 feet, 10,000 feet, 12,000 feet. You could block most of these crossings if there was. But right now we're 5,200 feet and not really looking to grow much longer in this corridor. At most, if there was something, we would, as we say, we could block one, possibly two. But again, if we were, what we'd be looking to do is break our trains or try to move our trains so as to clear that. But you would, at any given point in time, should have still two crossings available to you and to your emergency services to get through town.
Okay.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the information. A couple of weeks ago, we were hosted a mock disaster and that, and your people were very helpful in that. And I got a lot of comfort when your people, a very robust crew was there to help, but then some of the comments that they also made about the speed at which they could deploy if there was any kind of an incident as well. Can you talk about the deployment, if there was any kind of a accident in that from those people?
I wish I could. That's really the wheelhouse of Mike Lavecchio, who was here before from our government affairs. Unfortunately, I just don't have that at the tip of my tongue. Apologies, I didn't realize that was one.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no, the chief worked with them very closely, so he probably gained a lot of knowledge on how CPE can work with our town in the case of any kind of an incident.
Yeah, for sure. We have a good relationship with Dustin Ritter, who's one of the hazmat leads for CP Rail. So we talk on the phone back and forth. It's quite easy to get a hold of him, even if we have any questions. And we know the procedure to call the CP emergency line if there is something with the rail.
And again, on behalf of council, thank you very much for working with our administration on the different initiatives, railway safety improvement funding and grant applications, and assessing the safety needs in the corridor for us.
No, they're a good team. We've enjoyed working with them. Thank you.
The next slide. And I'll be introducing our Fire Chief, Kevin McEwen. He'll be providing a look at Coaldale in the context of emergency response. In the previous section, we looked at the lay of the land, the infrastructure, the number of trains, the length of trains in Coaldale and other communities. So we'll turn it over to our Fire Chief, who's conducted a bit of an emergency response to the northwest side of Coaldale. So I'll turn it over to our Fire Chief.
Thank you, Kaylin, and your worship, councillors, and members of the public. Thanks for coming today. Appreciate your time. So yeah, I'm going to be looking at just the fire response aspects going to the north and as our town grows. And just before I do that, just a little bit of history about us as the fire department, just in case no one is aware of that. So this graphic shows our progression and growth as a department to where we sit today. Coaldale Fire Department was established in 1948. Our original fire hall, which we're still operating out of today, was built in 1965. In 1986, an addition was built, and at that point in history, the population of the town of Coaldale was just over 4,800 people. And our department was only doing 50 calls a year. Here we are in 2019, and as of the 2016 census, our population was 8,215, and in 2017 we had a record year where calls were 418. It's clear why the fire hall expansion and renovation project was approved in the 2019-21 capital budget. This was our path to today, to an elite professional composite fire department. After increasing our full-time staff in 2018 to meet demands, we were staffed with 1 full-time chief, 2 full-time deputies, a firefighter paramedic intern, and 1 administrative coordinator who works for all 3 pillars of public safety that we represent, which is emergency services, municipal enforcement, and emergency management. during strategic planning, Council made public safety a top priority for this term. One focus area was continue to provide resources required by the CDES to achieve and maintain elite status. They've delivered on this priority by recently heavily investing into the Emergency Services Department. Just a couple weeks ago, we took delivery of our Pierce 110-foot Ascendant single-axle platform. Quint 105 was a joint purchase by the town of Coaldale and Lethbridge County, who contributed 20%. In return, we will respond to all areas of Lethbridge County should a neighboring department require mutual aid assistance from an aerial truck. Quint 105 is replacing an aging Engine 105 that is now 4 years past its life expectancy. Quint 105 can perform the same engine operations that E105 could, and in addition can perform as an elevated master stream amongst other tasks such as rescue and safely accessing roofs. It's an extremely versatile truck that diversifies our fleet, which was previously heavy on structural fire engines. We're currently outfitting the truck with equipment and expect it to be in service by the end of June. Another large investment into our department was the fire hall expansion and renovation project. Phase 1, which is under construction right now and shown in that picture, we'll see a new fire bays built, which are equipped with a proper diesel exhaust system, additional parking space for apparatus, a mezzanine for storage, space for an industrial washer, and will house our town's emergency operations center on the second floor, which will be moved over from the hub. The diesel exhaust system and industrial washer will assist in reducing the exposure of carcinogens to our firefighters and make for a safer work environment. Phase 1 has an expected completion date of November 2019. Phase 2 will be the renovation of the existing hall. It will include a large multi-purpose classroom, which will be used to instruct the Kate Andrews Fire Academy, which is in collaboration with Palliser Regional Schools and NATE, and will be starting in September of 2019. Also included in the renovation, new kitchen and living area, increased administration areas, meeting room, change rooms, and dorms. A display bay will also be constructed on the west end, which will house the antique fire engine and fire memorabilia. We have also been in early discussion with Alberta Health Services about leasing the dorms and one existing drive-through bay for EMS use. Phase 2 completion date expected second quarter of 2020. Response and risk. Coaldale is a growing community, and with strong growth comes an increase in risk due to higher populations, busier roads, and more industrial and commercial properties. Highway 3 and the CPR tracks are not a new risk that suddenly appeared overnight. It's a manageable risk that we have been successfully dealing with since the inception of the fire department. We have a high life value on the north side with approximately 2,000 residents and a very important economic driver for our town, the Northeast Industrial Park, which has a current assessment value of $67 million and growing. It's important to look at the land north of the highway as a whole and not solely focus on any single development. Our department takes a proactive approach to managing risk and take emergency management seriously. Our Deputy Chief of Public Safety serves as the Director of Emergency Management for the town and maintains a variety of emergency response plans up to date, including but not limited to floods, railway incidents, road transport incidents, fires, school shootings, and extreme drought, to name a few. As the Highway 3 and CP Rail crossings have public safety concerns, in a way to analyze past incidents in the town of Coaldale, I've put all motor vehicle collisions, auto versus pedestrians, and rail incidents on a map for the past 3 years. These are the collision stats from 2016 to 2018. The red stars indicate motor vehicle collisions, the yellow stars are auto versus pedestrian, and the green star is a train incident. Important to note is that these are responses which required a fire response. There would be further stats available from the RCMP and Alberta Transportation, which keeps a database on all incidents that happen, even minor fender benders, which fire was not requested. So these are for our fire department that we went out to. In total, over the 3 years, 8 collisions were responded to on Highway 3 and 1 train incident. The collisions we typically see on Highway 3 in Coaldale are less serious than what we see out in the county, in part due to the slower speed limits through town. The 1 train incident was a car versus train, and it's important to note that this was at a crossing with no crossing arms, so perhaps an upgraded crossing would assist with that in the future. There were 0 incidents involving pedestrians on Highway 3 in Coaldale. However, there were 2 auto versus pedestrian incidents on 20th Avenue Main Street. As you can see the 2 yellow stars on there. Due to this, it has been our long-standing policy to not exceed 40 kilometers an hour on Main Street while we respond due to that high risk. So we had an opportunity to look at our response times in Coaldale. This graph represents the typical flow of an emergency call from notification to scene intervention. And just to clarify some of the terms, shoot time is the time it takes once the fire department receives the call to mobilize staffing and respond the trucks out of the hall. For the scenarios that I'll get into, 6 minutes is used as a conservative approach to our response times. It should be noted our shoot times are well below this during daytime hours when there is staff at the hall available to respond. As we are staffed during the day, the same time a school would be open, our response times would be less during those times. Travel time is the amount of time it actually takes for the apparatus to travel to the incident site, and intervention is defined as the time when you arrive on scene and fire suppression efforts were to be initiated. This map shows a 10-minute response time for the fire department. This map was developed by Morrison Hirschfield when they did a study in 2013. The Coaldale boundary fit easily into the 10-minute response area. However, with the annexation, we are starting to push the limits in certain areas. Buildings that are located outside of the 10-minute response time are required to provide additional fire protection measure as per the Alberta Building Code, such as some listed on the slide. Non-combustible siding, limited glazing, residential sprinklers, and or increase the distance from property lines. Although the proposed joint school rec site falls within the 10-minute response time, a building classified as a Group A Division 2 under the Alberta Building Code would still require the following life safety measures. This is an early concept drawing of the proposed school and rec center, but it would require non-combustible construction, sprinkler system, a supervised fire alarm, and a hydrant within 45 meters. These life safety features make for an extremely safe building. The fire alarm gives quick notification to the fire department, and the sprinkler system limits fire growth before the arrival of the fire department. This map shows the response areas for the 6 departments that provide fire and rescue service to Lethbridge County. Those departments are Coaldale, City of Lethbridge, Pitcher Butte, Colehurst, Barons, and Nobleford. The 6 fire departments have a great working relationship and have trained and responded together in a variety of situations. If Coaldale has a large-scale incident or multiple incidents at once, we can call upon mutual aid through our mutual aid agreements for assistance. The closest mutual aid partner to Coaldale is the City of Lethbridge, and the nearest station is Station 4 on the north side. A time of 10.5 minutes for assistance to arrive could be forecast based on shoot time and travel distance. So we get into a couple scenarios where we look at response times over to the proposed site. The formula used to forecast response times was the RAND formula, which assumes an average speed of 56 kilometers an hour and considers average terrain, traffic, and weather. Here we use the shoot time of 6 minutes again, which is the after hours average shoot time for most composite fire departments, Again, our shoot time during the day would be closer to what you would see in Lethbridge or a career fire department of 90 seconds. So scenario 1, this is the shortest route distance-wise, and we're looking at 8 minutes to get to that site. Scenario 2, we're assuming that 845 crossing is blocked and we have to access 30th Street. This may actually be the preferred response route, as it keeps responding apparatus on Highway 3, which reduces risk of responding through 18th Avenue residential. Also may allow slightly faster speeds to be maintained on the highway. However, based on the formula that was used, distance, this is a slightly longer route. Scenario 3, looking to get to the same site. If 30th Street and the 845 were blocked, we would have 11th Street would be the closest access for that. And 10.4 minutes to get to that site. Scenario 4 shows an unlikely instance where using 8th Street as the only accessible route to the north. With the average wait time for a train to pass, it might be quicker to wait for the 845 or 30th Street crossing to clear rather than driving all the way around. However, this example is made to show that there are multiple accesses that are available to us to get to the north. So again, we wanted to compare to some other municipalities that have facilities similar to Coaldale or similar layouts. We looked at Lethbridge. This is a career fire department, so the shoot time is 90 seconds or less, so we use the 1.5 minutes on that, and we get a 4.7 minute. This example was used to show that the distances from the fire hall to the rec complex are similar. There we go, we look at our friends in Tabor here. To get to the Tabor Aqua Center, the shortest route from the Tabor Fire Hall to the Aqua Center involves crossing CP tracks and responding down Highway 3, and the time for that is 9.2 minutes. So we had a look at the school on the south side of the tracks and the highway that Galen talked about. This is the LT Westlake School Elementary. Response time to that was 9.2 minutes, utilizing the shortest route. If the Highway 36 and Highway 3 intersection is blocked, either by a train or something else, the alternate route to the school would be 10 minutes. Again, we'll have a look at Canmore. The Canmore Elizabeth Rummel School, with grades kindergarten to 3, is across the tracks and highway from the fire hall. Although there is an overpass for road traffic, the CP line could essentially cut off the shortest route. There's several alternates available for Canmore, however they substantially increase response time up to 12.4 minutes to get to the school. Strathmore Motor Products Sports Center. So this is the joint school and rec center. This facility was the destination for a field trip last year, which was attended by Fire Department, Coaldale Mayor and Council, Town and Min staff, Sport and Rec Working Group, user groups, and Palliser Regional Schools. So we looked at this facility for a response time of 8.5 minutes. Again, the hall is right at Trans-Canada, but does not have to cross the highway there. This is Fernie that we're looking at. So fire station's right downtown. The Fernie Aquatic Center is essentially right beside the CP tracks. Assuming the shortest route is not blocked, it's a 7.5 minute response. If the access near the aquatic center is blocked by a train, the alternative crossing is 1 kilometer away, which too could also be blocked by a train. This route increases the response time to 9.4 minutes. So just a brief summary on this table showing the like communities. I left Lethbridge out because it was the only career fire department in these comparisons. So these are all paid on call, similar to ours. As you can see, we are bang on for average response time to get to school or rec center. Additional summary of the scenarios. When we look at the response routes and times in Coaldale compared to that of other municipalities, it's evident that Coaldale's response times for a diversity of scenarios fall within an acceptable level. For the comparative examples listed, the distances are similar to those of Coaldale. As well, there are similar complexities regarding proximity to highways and railways. Coaldale has 4 rail crossings within a span of 3.3 kilometers, and the simple grid layout of the town and Lethbridge County allows many other additional crossings available for use by emergency services. It can be concluded that municipalities can safely and effectively grow on either side of a rail line and highway while still providing timely emergency response. So we had a quick look as well. Would any infrastructure upgrades assist us in achieving greater or better response times? One was traffic flow intersections. We all know how crazy 20 Ave and 20th Street get at certain times of the day. It's difficult for emergency vehicles to navigate around stop traffic. So if there was an opportunity to repurpose the vacant 7-Eleven to make for either wider turning lanes or improving that intersection could be beneficial for us. A controlled intersection at 30th Street would enhance public safety and assist in managing the increasing traffic volume regardless of a high school or rec facility in that area. Crossing gates at the CP rail crossing at 11th Street may increase safety for that rail crossing. Number 2, vehicular overpass. Obviously a very expensive option. Not looking seriously at this. However, an overpass would ensure safe and unencumbered access to the north regardless of train traffic. A pedestrian overpass. This would not be tied to response times, but a pedestrian overpass would be significantly more cost effective and would improve access between North and South Coaldale while increasing pedestrian safety. The current access point on the north end of 17th Street, so just out here where it goes to the highway, is limited to eastbound turns only. It would enhance the CDES department's ability to respond to calls that occur on the west side of Coaldale if provisions were made for westbound turning movements for emergency vehicles only. This will also allow the department to avoid responding down Main Street, which is a very high hazard, as well as avoiding the intersection of 20th Street and 20th Avenue. This would assist in responding to all calls to the west, including north and south of Highway 3, and is not recommended simply due to the proposed school rec center, but a way to improve all response times to the west in general. A second satellite fire station. As the community grows, a second fire station that housed minimal equipment, say 1 engine, would reduce response times to the annexed lands on the north, south, and west sides of Coaldale. Regardless of the proposed joint rec school facility, due to the planned residential developments north and south of the highway, and to maintain our 10-minute response time without imposing stricter development guidelines on new residential, a satellite hall should be considered in the future. Very early concept of where a satellite hall could potentially go, that would provide coverage to the fastest growing areas of Coaldale. Further study and a fire hall master plan would assist in determining the best location for a future station. Would full-time staffing improve response times? Having a full-time crew available at the fire hall 24/7, 365 would shave roughly 4.5 minutes off of the current shoot time of 6 minutes that CDES averages after hours. Although this measure would drastically reduce response times, it would require significantly more tax dollars to support than other options available. Due to the hard work, dedication, pride, and skill our firefighters have, this option is neither recommended nor required at this time. In conclusion, Town Council made public safety one of their top priorities this term, and they have lived up to this by heavily investing in the Emergency Services Department. Municipalities can safely and effectively grow on either side of the rail line and/or highway while still providing timely emergency response. Coaldale has 4 crossings within 3.3 kilometers to access north of Highway 3 should an emergency occur. Also, there is no single train that can block all accesses at once. The town should consider setting aside land on the west end of Coaldale for a future satellite fire hall if it is deemed necessary in the future, studied to be completed. There are a number of infrastructure upgrades and improvements that can be made to the town's intersections to increase vehicular and pedestrian traffic and assist emergency vehicle response regardless of a proposed high school rec facility north of Highway 3. Coaldale and District Emergency Services is committed to providing the highest level of service possible to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any questions by council through the chief? Councilor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't really have any direct questions, but I just really want to thank you very much for pulling this together for us in this short period. I know you're probably, a lot of it's off the top of your head because you're doing this type of work every single day, but
Absolutely.
you've certainly told us here that safety in our community is #1 priority, and I really want to thank you and your 35 or 38 volunteers that you have working with you. They're a great group of people, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief. At this time, I'd like to bring up and introduce Cameron Mills. He's our Manager of Economic and Community Development. We can make a little bit of room for him at the crowded table there. He will be presenting on behalf of Spencer Croyle, who was unable to be here today. So I'll let Cam take it away.
Thank you. So now that Coaldale's fire and police departments have assessed the northwest part of Coaldale, excuse me, through the lens of emergency response, the discussion can rightly turn to the question of how we arrived here today. So my section of the report will provide information about project milestones, timelines, and communication and engagement efforts that have taken place with respect to each of the 3 main aspects of the Joint High School and Multi-Use Recreation Facility project, or as we will refer to it as the 3 pillars of the project. So the first of those pillars is the concept of growing north and also the corresponding infrastructure and safety upgrades that are associated with growing north. Second, the construction of a multi-use recreation facility and the communication and engagement processes that were held as a way to determine the selection of this type of facility. And lastly, the opportunity for a new high school, which would be grades 7 through 12, and furthermore, grade reconfiguration package for Coaldale, including the timelines underpinning this opportunity. So the phrase growing north represents the convergence of 3 seemingly separate but closely related and highly complementary matters. That's community growth, recreational facility needs, and schooling needs. This section of the report is intended to clarify the ways in which all 3 matters identified, when brought together, result in an unprecedented opportunity for the community of Coaldale. So we begin with annexation. So growth in Coaldale's northwest has been contemplated since 2010 as per the mutually approved Town of Coaldale and Lethbridge County Intermunicipal Development Plan. From there, a growth study was required to be completed by the town. Work on the growth study began in 2013 and concluded in 2015 with the approval of the study by council on May 25th of 2015. Over the course of the next 3 years, the ideas, concepts, and principles underpinning how and where to manage Coaldale's growth resulted in provincial approval of the town's annexation application, which occurred in April of 2018. The process shown here illustrates the steps undertaken to get from the intermunicipal development plan to the annexation being submitted to the province for approval, which again was ultimately approved on April 1st of 2018. Woven into the timeline shown are a variety of ways that landowners were ultimately annexed, and the town and county communities were included in this process. In fact, a statement from the Municipal Government Board indicates the following: that the number of communication vehicles employed by the town shows a clear attempt to be inclusive and open during the annexation consultation process. And that's a statement provided to the town in writing by the Municipal Government Board in their annexation report. Some of the highlights of the findings of the growth study and the annexation application include the following. First, that Coaldale is a vibrant and growing community that is estimated to almost double in population by approximately 2041, with the estimated population at that time to be around 16,000 people. Second, that growth in the community is most effectively accommodated if primarily focused in the west from a cost of servicing perspective. Next, that new development in the northwest of the community will help to create a more complete community for the existing residents that live north of Highway 3. Complementary uses such as public and recreational facilities, commercial opportunities, and other daily needs will be areas of focus as growth is planned for the northwest. Coaldale's north-south population distribution is projected to increase from the current estimate of just over 20% of the community living north of the highway to a future distribution of an estimated 30 to 35% living north of the highway. In the context of growth in general and growth in the northwest of the community, the highways and railway are considered manageable constraints from technical, safety, and community growth perspectives, and this is underpinned by the many real-world examples that were presented earlier in this report. Creating safer, more functional, and effective connections between South and North Coaldale will benefit existing residents as well as accommodating future growth. So the logic of growth in the Northwest is further solidified by the fact that intersectional upgrades at Highway 3 and 30th Street are required, regardless of whether there is growth in the Northwest. And any other transportation enhancements that create safer and more functional connections to and from the Northwest will benefit the residents that already call Northwest Coaldale home. Long before the opportunity for a new high school came along, the desire to provide better connectivity between North and South Coaldale was on the town's radar. To this point, one of the illustrative slides from the town's annexation presentation to the Municipal Government Board provides context for the changes to traffic flow patterns as based on an intersectional analysis that was undertaken for this annexation application. Similarly, the expansion of the town's infrastructure system to support growth in the annexation area is most cost-effective and operationally efficient if it begins in the northwest part of the community and continues south over time. The details of these points are available in the town's annexation presentation to the Municipal Government Board that occurred in June of 2017, which is attached to this report. For the full annexation report and its corresponding appendices, you can consult the town's annexation webpage, which was launched initially in 2016. The transportation and potable, storm, and sanitary water systems enhancements and extensions are discussed in more detail later in the staff report and in a number of technical documents that have been added to the report as appendices. More on this point are available in the sections that follow. As a final note, it should be noted that the Municipal Government Board, following a public hearing which took place at the Coaldale Hub and which was attended and well advertised, approved the town's annexation request in full. The MGB's full written decision can be found in an appendix to this report. So the second pillar of the three pillars mentioned is functionally the origins of a recreation facility. So the need for a large recreation project has been a focal point of community discussion for several years. More recently, significant inroads have been made to make a major recreation project a reality. To illustrate this, consider the following milestones. At the June 12, 2017 council meeting, a delegation to council expressed the need for a major recreation facility, and to this end, came prepared with draft design drawings and conceptual layouts. At the same meeting, council passed a motion to set aside $1 million in reserves to dedicate to a major recreation project, and initiated the formation of a sport and recreation working group to determine the facilities that would best serve the community. The Sport and Recreation Working Group was formed on September 25th of 2017 after a widely advertised call for nominations from the general public had concluded. Sport and recreation needs were consistently highlighted in the strategic planning exercises Council undertook in fall of 2017 and winter 2018, and are prevalent in the 2018 to 2021 Council Strategic Plan, which was first presented to the public at 2 open houses that were held in the evenings at the Coaldale Community Centre on April 24th and April 26th of 2018. Following these open houses, a community-wide follow-up survey that asked for feedback on Council's draft strategic priorities took place over the weeks that followed. The poster boards that were displayed at these open houses and the community-wide survey are attached to this report. A months-long sport and recreation needs assessment survey was released in June of 2018 and ultimately concluded in September of 2018. The results of the survey indicated that both an indoor pool and a multi-sport indoor recreation facility were the two projects of highest priority for the community. The outcomes of the Sport and Rec Working Group Committee were presented to Council for review at the regular Council meeting of October 11th, 2018. On November 13th, the Sport and Rec Working Group provided their formal recommendation that Council pursue a multi-use recreation facility as well as explore other opportunities for fruitful partnerships in the future. On November 26th, Council approved the town's 2018 to 2021 capital and operating budgets, which are attached to this report. Following the approval of the capital and operating budget, the Council submitted a media release, and a number of news articles that reported on the town's approved projects and initiatives were published. As a way to further inform the community about the projects and initiatives that were approved by Council, a series of information sessions, complete with poster boards and information booklets, were held in Council chambers during normal operating hours from December 3rd to December 14th of 2018. In addition, weekday evening sessions were held both on December 5th and December 13th of 2018 for those who were unable to attend daytime sessions, providing residents or anyone interested in the materials with an opportunity to speak directly with senior managers who were in attendance in the evenings at those times. The third pillar, the opportunity for a new school and grade reconfiguration package. The need for a change in Coaldale's schooling facilities and programming, and indeed the need for more classroom space amidst a growing community, has been a focal topic of discussion for many years. Palliser School Division has held community meetings over the past 2 to 3 years that have been focused on how to best approach the community's educational needs, including the possibility of grade reconfigurations and changes to the schools themselves. In January of 2017, public meetings were held with over 200 participants to discuss how to address schooling needs in Coaldale. In May of 2017, a follow-up meeting was hosted by Palliser School Division, and 61 public submissions were collected from parents and community members that focused on how to address the educational needs of the community. In October of 2017, a new board was elected to represent Palliser Regional School Division, and at the same time, a new council was elected for the town of Coaldale. At the Coaldale Council Strategic Planning Retreat of November 20th, 2017, 3 major takeaways in regards to community education priorities emerged from Council. First, to collaborate with the education sector to identify and implement ways to retain students. Second, to engage the local schools and school boards on recreational partnerships in order to retain students. And third, to identify and explore educational programming partnerships and opportunities between local schools and various town departments, including the fire department, arts and culture, recreation, and engineering. On May 28th, the Board of Palliser Regional School Division and Council of the Town of Coaldale met over a joint business supper. During this evening, the two bodies brainstormed on how to deal with large class sizes and how to retain students in Coaldale through infrastructure enhancements and the creation of educational partnerships such as the Coaldale Fire Academy. On June 21st of 2018, Palliser School Division, along with their architectural consultants, held a community meeting at the library of Kate Andrews High School. At this meeting, they discussed utilization rates, community growth projections, a potential grade reconfiguration, and it was announced that Palliser intended to make a new high school in Coaldale the division's #1 capital priority. The opportunity for a new high school worked hand in hand with the grade reconfiguration package that was proposed. The PowerPoint presentation that accompanied this community meeting can be found as an appendix to this report. As the chart indicates, the grade reconfiguration that has been developed by the school division was based on the need to address the ongoing strong growth of children between ages of 5 and 19, which in Coaldale is approximately 4 times the provincial average. The overarching goals of the reconfiguration are illustrated in the excerpt from the division's approved 10-year planning priorities and 3-year capital budget documents, which can also be found on the division's website. By reconfiguring in such a way that the high school is home to grades 7 through 12, more room becomes available for K-6 students, as Jenny Emery would become a K-3 school and R.I. Baker could transition to grades 4 through 6. The mile markers listed in the bullet points are significant when viewed in the context of historical working relationships between the town of Coaldale and Palliser School Division. Prior to the current council and school board term, communication between the entities was minimal for a variety of reasons. But after the 2017 elections had concluded, town council and school board trustees made a point of enhancing the relationship between the two organizations. The continued focus on the relationship between the town and the division and the respective desires of each entity to create win-win partnerships is one of the main reasons that allowed the entities to work together to bring a once-in-a-generation opportunity to see a new high school approved and constructed for Coaldale and the surrounding area. On September 25th of 2018, not long after the two entities had analyzed the community's demographics and discussed the need for a new school site in Coaldale, Palliser School Division and the town of Coaldale were notified that the province of Alberta's Ministry of Education and Ministry of Infrastructure would be undertaking value management sessions with the school division and that the sessions would be held on October 25th and 26th. Given the very brief period of time between the notification date and the date of the sessions, the town and division had to focus all efforts on preparing a compelling proposal for a new high school. With reference to the province's guidelines for planning school sites, it was noted during discussions between the division and the town that joint-use facilities are looked upon as major benefits for schools and communities when the province is deciding, amongst several hundred competing and compelling alternatives, which projects they choose to fund. The exercise itself included 2 days of intensive discussions facilitated by a project management firm, in this case Cornerstone Project Management Professionals, with a broader group of attendees made up of members of parent councils, teachers, administrators from each of the Palliser school divisions in Coaldale and the surrounding rural area, town councillors and town staff, architects, cost consultants, and representatives from both Alberta Education and Alberta Infrastructure. So that leads to the convergence of these 3 project pillars. And again, to recap, the project pillars as we see them are first, the concept of growing north, second, the concept of a recreational facility, and third, the opportunity for a new school. While the town and school division were preparing the proposal for a new high school, the Sport and Recreation Needs Assessment Survey had just closed, and the results had indicated that an indoor pool and a multi-sport indoor recreation facility were the 2 top priorities for the community, with an indoor pool being ranked 1% higher than a multi-sport recreation facility by the 850-plus survey respondents. With a multi-sport indoor recreation facility as one of the top priorities for the community and the significant benefit that could be realized by tying this to a new school, the connection between the 2 projects was made, and what started as a proposal for a new high school became a proposal for a new school and a joint multi-sport recreation facility. As the result of the 3-year annexation process, which occurred from 2015 to 2017, and the engineering feasibility analysis that was required to justify the lands as part of that process, the town of Coaldale was armed with a strong technical baseline on the infrastructure upgrades required to make the newly annexed lands developable. The town had undertaken an especially detailed analysis of the quarter section it purchased on the northwest part of Coaldale. It is important to underscore that years before the opportunity for a new school or recreation center became tangible or within striking distance, the town knew the steps required to make the town's quarter of the northwest section of Coaldale developable. So accordingly, given the significant amount of analysis and effort that had gone into identifying Coaldale's northwest as an area suitable and preferable for community growth, the location now known as Site A was formalized as part of the proposal for a joint high school and multi-use recreation center, and it was submitted to the province for funding consideration. The proposal represents the culmination and alignment of 3 projects that have each separately had a significant amount of time and effort put into them. The visual timeline provided here for the major project milestones for each project is presented. An additional detail regarding the communication and engagement efforts for each project is provided after the timeline. So I think what's crucial here is to understand that this point here, which is the point where Site A is determined, is not the beginning of a process. Rather, it represents the culmination of multiple, extensive, and thorough projects and processes undertaken by the town over the course of several years. These processes include, among other things, detailed technical study and analysis and consistent and diverse forms of public engagement throughout. Which leads us to the second phase of my portion of the report, which is to say discussion of communication and engagement.
Okay, while you have a pause for refreshment, Deputy Mayor Avery has a comment or a question?
Thank you, Worship. I think it's kind of a comment. We forgot to mention in your package of the meetings with the Holy Spirit School Division as well.
Correct.
That happened with previous council, trying to get them on board as well with a joint project with the schooling. So there was consultation with both school divisions at that time.
Correct.
And that doesn't show in here.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, this section will address the communication and engagement efforts for each project pillar that took place leading up to and following the town and Palliser's presentation of the joint school and rec project for provincial consideration. So before looking at the specific communication and engagement efforts as they relate to the joint school and recreation project, a broad overview of the town's communication framework is provided. First, all town council meetings are posted to the community calendar and promoted on both Twitter and Facebook on the Friday when the agenda is posted, and again on Sunday evening and Monday midday to promote the meeting and to encourage the live streaming of the meeting. All meetings, including the live streaming video, are archived on the town's website. The town maintains a social media program that makes use of the 2 most commonly viewed mediums, being Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, the town has 1,957 followers. Each time a post is made, it is posted to a feed that is visible to all 1,957 followers. Posts are commonly liked and reposted and shared in other ways. What that means for those who aren't necessarily familiar with Twitter is that all 1,957 people that follow the town of Coaldale have access to that information as it's presented, and if they in turn choose to do so, they can share it with anyone that follows them, which means that the reach of these types of mediums grows exponentially as it is liked and shared on those mediums. On Facebook, the town averages about 10,000 views per week, with about 4,100 in terms of post engagements. Viewers who choose to interact with the information, such as sharing and reposting. The town's website has been visited over 500,000 times since it went live in 2013. If a daily average is calculated based on the total number of visits, the website gets approximately 200 visits per day, a little over that. This is not to say that each visit is focused on the project listed in this engagement report, but simply a note indicating that the amount of traffic on the website is relatively high. The town also publishes a quarterly Talk of the Town article in the Sunny South News. These articles are full-page ads that provide details on important information and events in the community. Furthermore, the town publishes a monthly Coaldale Connection newsletter that is inserted into utility bills, both paper and digital. The reach for the information contained in these bills is to all residents, businesses, and organizations in Coaldale. Additionally, Town Council passed a public participation policy in June of 2018, and the policy, based on the International Association for Public Participation, or IAP2 spectrum. It should be noted that the spectrum is not a process in and of itself and is instead a guide for where on the spectrum a particular project, process, or activity may fall. And additionally, to those forms of communication mentioned, from time to time, the town has made use of physical signage located adjacent to major roadways in the community, typically along Highway 3 and 845, as well as near the arena and on Main Street and other high-traffic locations. The engagement and communication efforts of the three project pillars are broken down in tables, and we'll go through those. So the annexation process undertaken by the town was completed over a period of approximately 4 years. The process began with a growth study, which was initiated in 2013 and completed and approved by Town Council in 2015. The growth study analyzed physical features, demographic trends, infrastructure and servicing requirements, and relevant policy documents. Being a document that was technical in nature and fixed in terms of scope and focus, the growth study did not include a significant amount of community engagement. However, subsequent to the growth study being created and approved, the annexation process was initiated. The public engagement framework used for the annexation process is detailed in the table provided. So with respect to the efforts undertaken to promote the public hearing that was hosted by the Municipal Government Board for the purpose of assessing the suitability of the town's annexation application and to hear from concerned residents who opposed the same, the public hearing date, time, and location was advertised on the annexation webpage several weeks in advance of the hearing. Facebook posts related to the hearing were posted on June 13th, 19th, and 22nd. Twitter posts were in line with Facebook posts. Two advertisements were placed in the local newspaper, both June 13th and June 20th. The notice of the hearing was mailed to every landowner in the annexation area in advance of the hearings by direct mail. And lastly, a public hearing was held on June 22nd, 2017. With respect to engagement efforts undertaken prior to the hearing, as a way of bringing community awareness about the town of Coaldale's annexation proposal, the following occurred. With respect to the website, the annexation webpage went live in March of 2016 and was updated regularly even after it went live. The Facebook and Twitter numbers would have been similar to what was provided previously. With respect to the newspaper, all engagement opportunities were posted in the newspaper, including the survey, the open house, the notification of application being made, and the Municipal Government Board public hearing. Furthermore, landowners to be annexed were updated regularly by way of annexation brochures and update letters, provided annexation frequently asked question brochure sent in April, annexation frequently asked question and update brochure sent in October 2016, and directly affected landowner information package was sent in September 2016. A letter was sent to all intermunicipal development plan landowners in April of 2017. Open houses were held on November 3rd and November 4th, 2016, and a survey went live on the town's website on March 21st and closed April 8th of 2016. Paper copies of that survey were also made available. With respect to communication and engagement efforts undertaken as a way to promote Council's 2018 to 2021 strategic plan, the draft strategic plan was posted on the town's website on its own separate page at the beginning of April of 2018. Open house dates and subsequently survey dates were posted on Facebook on April 22nd, 24th, and 25th. Twitter posts were made on the 15th, 17th, and 20th. April 2018 Talk of the Town feature was featured in the local newspaper, the Sunny South News. In addition to that, radio advertisements were taken out, running from April 23rd to 26th, being featured on B93 and Country 95.5. Physical signage was placed. 2 signs were placed, one at Highway 3 and 845, and one at 20th Avenue and 13th Street for 1 week prior to the open houses. The open house itself took place on April 24th and 26th, and an online survey was opened from April 24th to May 15th. With respect to the 2019 to 2021 capital budget, planning process began subsequent to the strategic plan being passed in July of 2018. After a number of budget meetings were held with council, a draft budget was presented to council at the November 26th, 2018 meeting and approved at the same meeting. Subsequently, a multi-day information session was hosted at the town office. So the following table provides information with respect to efforts undertaken as a way to invite the community to discuss council's 2019 to 2021 capital budget. The budget was posted to the website in early December. Facebook posts were made throughout the month of December, as with Twitter. A newspaper advertisement was taken out on December 4th, 2018. A drop-in open house, which was made display made available here in the council chambers, was open to the public during regular business hours from December 3rd to December 14th. At which point anyone with any questions or concerns could bring management staff out to discuss any element of the budget that they had questions about or that they wanted to discuss further. In addition to that, management was here in the evenings on both December 5th and 13th from 4 to 7 p.m. to make themselves available for any member of the public that wanted to take a look at the capital budget during those times. With respect to the sport and recreation component of what we've discussed, at the June 12, 2017 council meeting, the motion to set aside $1 million for future sport and recreation facilities was passed, which initiated the formation of a sport and recreation working group. Calls to sit on the Sport and Recreation Working Group were distributed by way of direct mail-outs in the fall of 2017 Leisure Guide and through the town's social media platforms. Subsequent to the closure of the call for nominations, which occurred on September 22nd, all 9 community members who applied were appointed to the group. In addition to the work the Sport and Recreation Working Group had undertaken, an online and paper-based survey was opened over the spring and summer of 2018, and 873 responses were collected. An indoor pool and a multi-sport indoor recreation facility, which means various court sports, field sports, and additional flex space as specified in the survey, were the leading facilities in terms of those facilities respondents would most like to have funded. The indoor pool was 23% of responses, and the multi-sport indoor recreation facility was 22% of responses. Communication efforts undertaken as a way to promote and invite citizens to sit on the Sport and Rec Working Group included the following. Facebook posts for the month of June 2017 with multiple Twitter posts over the same period. 2 newspaper advertisements taken out in the Sunny South News. Notice of the call for nominations went out in the late summer of 2017 as a direct mail out in the fall 2017 Leisure Guide. Next, efforts undertaken as a way to promote and invite residents to fill out the Sport and Recreation survey developed by the Sport and Recreation Working Group included Facebook posts on through July and August and September of 2018. Additionally, posts consistently on Twitter from June through September, and newspaper advertisements taken out in June and July 2018 editions of the Sunny South News. The survey was also advertised in the August 2018 Coaldale Connection. Additionally, we provided for some face-to-face displays where at fall mass sporting registration a community engagement table was available, and the Sport and Recreation survey was advertised at that time. And obviously the survey component speaks for itself. So, subsequent to the value management sessions and the passing of the 2019 and 2021 capital budget, it was clear that the community desired more information about the school and joint use recreation facility. The town, in collaboration with the school division, committed to holding 2 information sessions on February 5th and 12th of 2019. The sessions were advertised in a variety of formats well in advance of the session dates. Notice of the sessions were also shared with the school administrators for all schools in Coaldale, including Holy Spirit and Coaldale Christian Schools. Palliser School Division also shared the community information sessions on their own social media platforms, as well as various media releases that would submit from time to time. With reference to the town's public participation policy, Town Council recognized the significance of the opportunity for a new school and decided to focus all efforts on ensuring the best proposal possible could be submitted to the province for review. In this particular instance, with the combination of a very limited time frame available to prepare a proposal, the culmination of the work completed surrounding sport and recreation matters, and the annexation and growth study that has identified Northwest Coaldale as an area of focus for future growth, the proposed site was selected and all reasonable efforts were made to achieve the objective of the informed portion of the IAP2 spectrum. The IAP2 spectrum, again, is not a sequential or evolutionary process in and of itself where every project moves through each of the engagement categories of progression, but rather, on the contrary, it's a guide for how to plan for participatory processes based on the part of the spectrum to which a project most appropriately falls. Where a particular project falls on the IAP2 spectrum, being inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower, is to the discretion of Town Council and is based on the variables, complexities, and context of any given project. The details of how and why the decision to select the site as part of the value management sessions were provided at the February 5th and 12th information sessions. So, engagement efforts undertaken as a way to promote and invite residents to attend the joint school and rec project community information sessions of February 5th and 12th included school and recreation facility webpage going live December 23rd, 2018, posts on January 24th, 27th, 28th, 30th, 31st, February 2nd, 4th, 5th, 7th, 10th, and 11th on Facebook, multiple similar posts on Twitter, advertising running in the February 5 and 12 editions of the Sunny South News, direct mail out providing the information sessions were advertised in the February 2019 edition of the Coaldale Connection, and obviously the information sessions themselves taking place in February of that year. We're at the end. So, as of April 1st, 2018, the objective to facilitate growth in the northwest portion of Coaldale was solidified by provincial approval of the town's annexation request in full. A key tenet of growing to the northwest was and is to create a more complete community in that part of town that includes supportive non-residential uses such as public and recreational amenities, shopping, and other suitable and compatible forms of development. There is no denying that the highway and railway represent constraints when considering connectivity and access from south to north and north to south. However, these constraints are considered manageable, and the ability to manage these constraints will result in a more connected community that benefits not just future growth, but the existing neighborhoods and residents, the 2,000 some odd residents that already reside on the north side of Coaldale. In the realm of community development and infrastructure planning, one of the more common ways to determine if a particular scenario can be effectively managed is to study other similar scenarios that have already been constructed and are operational. The previous section of the report has demonstrated that there are varieties of ways to effectively manage the constraints that are present in Coaldale's case. Given the goals and objectives of each of the three matters at hand, growth, schooling, and recreation, the placement of the proposed joint high school and multi-use recreation facility on what is known as Site A is considered a suitable location from both a land use and community development perspective.
Thank you, Cameron. Any questions, comments from the council directed at Cameron? Oh, I want to thank you on behalf of council for a comprehensive report on. You got dealt the lion's share of talking here, so thank you very much.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Kaylin, your turn again.
All right, thank you very much, Cam, for pinch hitting for Spencer there. I'd like to introduce Andrea Kester. She's our Director of Infrastructure and Engineering. She is an engineer, and she will be looking at the infrastructure and servicing of Site A, the northwest lands owned by the town, and how the costs and logistics of that servicing and infrastructure compares to that of the other sites that were examined.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and fellow councilors.
No.
No? But how can you inform people on something that's biased?
Point of order,
You're not
Mr. Mayor.
promoting any other.
Point of order.
I understand that you guys provided information to the public, but that information was biased.
Thank you, Your Honor. So when the different sites were reviewed, we asked ourselves about 12 different questions. And here's just a quick summary of the major questions that we talked about. So we looked at sufficient downstream capacity. Is there sufficient capacity? And if not, what upgrades are required and what cost is that? What's the cost to bring services to site? Are the upgrades required? Is it only for this new facility, or is it for future or even existing development? Are there any constraints or limitations related to drainage or potential flooding? What other site analysis processes would need to be completed for each site? And then what is the total cost to service the site? One of the last questions is, can the surrounding transportation network service the facility? And if not, again, what upgrades are required and what's the cost for this? So using these assessment questions, we started analyzing the different sites. Site A that we've talked about already is west of the newly constructed wetlands. So it's important to note here that there is a proposed 3,000 to 4,000 new residents that will be living in the area in the future, as shown in the blue. We also looked at Site B, which is west of the newly constructed Storm Pond, south of Highway 3, and west of the Evergreen Estates residents. Site C is the area west of Westgate. Site D is the existing Kate Andrews school site. Site E is commonly called the old feedlot and chicken barns, for lack of a better term, sorry. And then Site F being the old campground. So Site D was quickly excluded because the site was already determined to be untenable to work with given the size of the site, the likelihood of long-term interruption to students, staff, and the overall education environment that would result from a multi-year renovation or construction project occurring at this location. So this determination was completed during the value scoping session put on by Alberta Education. So there are some consistencies that we looked at throughout each site. The first being that each site requires 2 water main connections, and that's for redundancy, so that if there is a break in the line somewhere, the facility would still have water. Each set must also have 2 means of transportation access. This is for emergency services managed on side of things and good design practices. So these 2 concepts go for each site that was looked at. And then the total costs that I'll be providing you today include contingency, geotechnical quality assurance, and quality control during construction, as well as engineering fees for detailed design and inspection during the construction process. So Site A, as I said previously, is just immediately west of the Centennial Wetlands here. So the upgrades that are required here is we could tie into the sanitary in 16th Avenue right here. For the water, the 2 connections, there's another water connection in 16th Avenue that we could tie into, as well as 18th Avenue. On the transportation side of things, we'd have to do upgrades at the Highway 3 and 30th Street intersection, as well as 30th Street and 18th Avenue intersections. In February of 2016, a transportation impact assessment was completed for this intersection down here at Land O'Lakes Drive and Highway 3. And that really stated that any future growth is expected to put pressure on this Land O'Lakes Drive intersection, as well as the Highway 3 intersection. Alberta Transportation accepted the conclusions and recommendations of this traffic impact assessment in January of 2018. But it's important to note that this TIA, or traffic impact assessment, was completed prior to annexation, so it did not account for the additional growth in this area with the new post-annexation boundary. So a revised traffic impact assessment is currently being finalized that includes the annexed areas and the proposed school and multi-use recreation facility. The draft version of this TIA highlights that upgrades to the intersection of Highway 3 and 30th Street are required. And so that part has been included in the costing. The intersectional upgrades that we've looked at for this intersection include signalizing the intersection, adding safety drop-down gates and bells at the CP crossing, lighting the intersection, and dropping the speed limit from 70 kilometers per hour to 50 kilometers an hour. And we'd also like to add an at-grade pedestrian crossing at this intersection, but I'll talk about that a little bit farther in the presentation. One of the next things is widening sorry, I lost my mouse. 30th Street between Highway 3 and 18th Ave. Again, this is from the draft traffic impact assessment that we expect to see a final version in the next couple weeks on. And then we also looked at widening 18th Avenue between 30th Street and the new facility. To be able to get the traffic into the existing residential community and to the facility. And then the last pieces of the upgrades for this Site A would be to have 2 new roads, one from 18th Avenue and one from 16th Avenue. So the total capital cost for these upgrades came in at $7.4 million. So I'll go over the same thing roughly for Site B. First of all, I just want to note that this land is not currently owned by the town of Coaldale, so we would have to include the cost for purchasing this land in the capital cost. So it is included in the capital cost shown there. And the other thing that I should note is in the 2016 traffic impact assessment that was approved by Alberta Transportation, it said that any future development north or south of the highway would require signalized upgrades at this 30th Street and Highway 3 intersection. And so that has been included for Site A, B, and C. So if I start with sanitary again, we could tie into, there's a couple options. We could do an entire new line that tied in up here to 16th Avenue, or you could tie into 23rd Avenue and upgrade a windy route through the existing town of Coaldale. One of the issues with doing a new line, sanitary line, is that it would have to be upsized for future development. So it would mean that when it was just the new facility there wouldn't be enough momentum, there wouldn't be enough sanitary flow to push all the sanitary flows there. So it means that you have a lot of deposits that drop out. It makes it hard to operate and maintain, makes it time intensive to clean the lines up, and truthfully, they get quite smelly. On the water side of things, there's our main water line down 30th Street, so we can tie in north of this facility and south of the facility. We'd also have to widen 30th Street from Highway 3 south to the proposed access, and then have proposed new roads. You could have one from 30th Street and maybe potentially one from Highway 3. So the total capital cost for this came out at $15.6 million. So when looking at Site C, if we look at sanitary first again, you could tie into the 23rd Ave sanitary, but it would trigger this upgrade shown and highlighted in red. And that's because we have an existing sewer backup problem in this Garden Grove area, and it's just not prudent to add in more to an existing issue. So we'd have to do that upgrade. The water is quite easy to tie in on this scenario. We could tie into 30th Street and to 23rd Avenue. Again, we'd have to upgrade the intersection at Highway 30th or Highway 3, and 30th Street, as well as widen 30th Street to the proposed facility. We'd have to construct roads to the facility again, one from 30th Ave and one from 23rd. We'd also, as per the TIA, have to upgrade this intersection here at Land O'Lakes Drive and 21st Avenue. And we didn't update the TIA for this part of the review, but looking at the existing traffic counts, it seemed prudent and conservative to assume updating the intersections at Land O'Lakes Drive and 23rd Avenue and Land O'Lakes Drive and 24th Street would be required. So the total capital cost for this would be $12.4 million. So the main issues with this scenario is that it triggers about $4.5 million to upsize this existing sanitary line through town that I talked about. There's also zero tax revenue from a facility like this, and there would be no offsite levies associated with it. And it would take up the entire parcel. So you can see here where the dash line is, that's private land that we would have to purchase for the facility, and then we own the south portion. So the facility would encompass the entire town-owned parcel, which would allow for no future town development or revenue, which could help pay for some of these upgrades. So it would mean an increase in taxes, and Kyle will touch on that more after. So then to switch over to Site E, again, this is only partially owned by the town, so this north part is privately held, and the south parcel is owned by the town of Coaldale. So again, there would be some land acquisition costs in there. We could tie into the sanitary system in the northwest corner of the quads, but it would trigger an upgrade to the sanitary line along 13th Street from the quads up to 20th Avenue. The water we could tie into 17th Street and at the quads. We'd have to, 17th Street is quite narrow, so we would have to widen that to provide access to the facility and to create a road from 17th Street and extend 13th Street north from 30th Avenue to the site. We'd also have to look at upgrading these intersections. So Highway 845 and 30th Avenue, 17th Street and 30th Avenue, and then 13th Street and 30th Avenue. The capital cost for this is $10.9 million, but I do want to make note that there is a potential that 13th Street would have to be extended north across the canal if this proposed school and rec facility was at this site, and that cost is not included in the $10.9 million. So the main issues with this scenario are it triggers about a $2.5 million sanitary upgrade, so that's this upgrade shown here. There's significant land costs purchasing this north half of the parcel. And again, there's zero tax revenue from this facility and zero options for offsite levies. The facility would encompass the entire 2 parcels, which would leave no space for future development or revenue, which would again mean that taxes would have to pay for all this infrastructure upgrades. It would be more beneficial to the community to develop the lands or work with a developer to develop the land at Site E, because that would provide the development cash flow to pay for the required upgrades. Because the joint facility will encompass the entire 20 acres, all infrastructure would be funded by taxes. It would be more economical to have infills in this area because lot sales, offsite levies, and development revenues would pay for the upgrades to infrastructure, and the future tax base will create about $240,000 annually to pay for the operations and maintenance. So lastly, we looked at Site F. Again, this is roughly half and half owned by the town and privately. So this east portion is owned by the town and the west portion is privately held. So on the sanitary wise, we could tie into the sanitary in 20th Avenue, just south of the Parkside development. For the water, again, we could tie into 20th Avenue and in 8th Street here. We would need to do a little bit of rehabilitation along 20th Avenue where we're doing our tie-ins, and we would need to rehabilitate 8th Street to make sure that it was widened enough to get to the facility. Again, we'd need a couple new roads in, so we'd need one off of 8th Street and one from 20th. And the capital cost for this is also $7.4 million. So the issues with this scenario is there's, again, zero tax revenue, zero offsite levies from it, and it would, again, encompass the entire parcel and allow for no future development or revenue. Short term, you'll notice that the costs for Site A and Site F are very similar. However, comparatively little of the surrounding area would benefit from the economic energy a development of this magnitude would generate. This slide provides a summary of the total capital costs for each site that we looked at. And I just wanted to say that with the time constraints experienced during the selection process, the town could only truly negotiate on land that we owned as per the Alberta education requirements for site readiness. But in speaking with Palliser and reviewing the town's growth rate and growth potential, we are of the position that a future middle school or elementary school in Area B could be an appropriate fit as this area develops in the long term. The desire for more trails and pathways in Coaldale has long been identified as a central recreational priority in the community. In the 2019 to 2021 capital budget, funds have been set aside to pave over 7.1 kilometers of pathway in Coaldale, providing safe, non-vehicular connectivity to all sides of the community, north, south, east, and west, as well as a connection to the Link Regional Pathway that is being constructed between between Coaldale and the city of Lethbridge along the St. Mary River Irrigation District Canal through Lethbridge County. So this link pathway connection is shown in the mustard color in this left bottom side of the picture. As shown in this drawing, there's actually 2 phases, well, truthfully 3. So the first phase is this, this red color, I'll call it, which is 1.7 kilometers of pathway through Coaldale, and it includes the following key connection points. Along the east boundary of the former campground, along 8th Street, along the canal, along 17th Street, and along the east side of Cottonwood. The budget, the 2019 budget, I should say, for this is $250,000. Phase 2 of the pathway system is shown in pale blue. And so this is about 3 kilometers of paved pedestrian pathway, which would have a connection between Land O'Lakes Drive and 23rd Avenue, all the way to 30th Street, up 30th Street to 18th Avenue, and then across 18th Avenue to connect with the Garden Grove subdivision. And in addition to this, it would be along 16th Avenue between the Centennial Wetland and Highway 845. The next piece of it is the Centennial Pathway. Oh, sorry. The budget for phase 2 is $500,000. So as a way to celebrate Coaldale's centennial year, a commemorative pathway along with park benches and landscaping enhancements is being constructed around the perimeter of the Centennial Wetland. This pathway will add just over 2 kilometers of paved recreational pathways to the town's broader pathway network and will allow users to experience the wetlands firsthand. So this is shown in yellow here around the Centennial Wetland and is currently being constructed. The last piece of the pathway connectivity is to construct a pedestrian overpass across Highway 3 and the CP train tracks to provide the community with a safe and secure access from north to south in Coaldale. In preliminary meetings with Alberta Transportation and CP Rail, and from information provided by Transport Canada, the following grants are available. So this kind of piggybacks on what Pete and Paul from CP Rail were saying, that there's the Transport Canada Rail Safety Improvement, the RSIP program funding, that funds 50% of projects within CP's right-of-way, and they fund 80% of projects in a municipality. And CP has also offered that they will do the grants to Transport Canada on behalf of the town for us, and they will also provide 12.5% funding on the grants, and that would be for the 30th Street intersection with Highway 3, the fence between 30th Street and Highway 845, as well as the pedestrian overpass. The pedestrian overpass would be designed to be accessible with ramps on both sides, and the estimated capital cost for this is $4.8 million. So this is just a quick slide showing our existing Highway 3 and 30th Street intersection. You can see currently there's stop signs to the north for Range Road 203 and to the south for 30th Street. Currently at 70 kilometers per hour through this intersection, and it's not lighted and there's no pedestrian crosswalk here. So these are the upgrades that we're talking about. We'd like to decrease the speed from 70 to 50 kilometers per hour on the west side of this intersection. We'd like to signalize the intersection in all 4 directions. We'd like to light it, and this dark line shows the proposed pedestrian pathways and a raised crosswalk. With this would include, and for the intersection, would include the safety drop-down arms and bells for the CP tracks, and there would be separate arms and bells for the pedestrian pathway that would be timed with the lights and with CP. So as I've kind of highlighted already, one of the safety features would be to do a safety fence between 30th Street and Highway 845. This would be kind of the standard 7-foot chain link fence that CP recommends for this. We're talking about having up to 4 emergency gates through this area so that if there was an emergency, we would, well, not we, but emergency services would be able to get through in other locations. And the fence itself would be done as per CP's recommendations. The conceptual cost for the street lights, the signals, the pedestrian gates, and the CP gates, and the fence is $2.2 million. And so this example just shows a photo of a safety fence adjacent to the train tracks in Canmore, actually. You'll see this building on the left-hand side is called Elevation Place, and it's their new recreation facility. And then you can just see in the red, you know, that's the safety fence that I'm speaking of. So I've zoomed in a little bit because the original photo, you know, it's a little hard to see, which to me is a positive note that it's not an eyesore. It doesn't really stick out, but it does its job, which is keeping our community safe. So a few items have been completed to date. A geotechnical evaluation was completed by Tetra Tech Canada. 7 boreholes were drilled, varying in depth between 6.6 meters and 6.9 meters on February 26th of 2019. The geotech report came back saying that the area is suitable for a school and multi-use rec facility. A Phase 1 environmental site assessment was completed by WA Environmental Services on November 28th of 2018. The report stated that the site has been used for agricultural land since the early 1900s and that there's no evidence of environmental contamination associated with the site, so no further environmental investigation of the site is recommended. The last thing that's been done is a preliminary site servicing. A drawing and the preliminary design has been completed by MPE Engineering.
Questions through to Andrea? Councillor Chapman?
Andrea, thank you so much for your hard work on this and bring us up to date. My question or comment is really a point that site D was not taken into consideration, for which I think we're pretty much beyond that, although I do get the odd question from the general public about building on site D, and I think we need to maybe give us some clarity to the logistics for why it's not the preferred location.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, I can just briefly touch on it today, but the value scoping document that was provided by Cornerstone PMP gives extreme details on exactly why, but generally speaking, it would be about a minimum 2 to 3 year construction process to either do a major renovation and or addition to the school. And so they said that, you know, there would be entire years of students that could have their entire high school in a construction zone, and that's not very conducive to learning, and it would mean that the students would be transferred around a lot. The other thing there is because it's a smaller site, there wouldn't be the space to do a joint rec facility with it, and Alberta Education and Palliser Regional Schools are both very keen on doing a joint facility, and especially because of some of the capital cost savings to do a joint facility.
I'll turn it over to Kaylin.
If I could just augment our Director of Infrastructure and Engineering's comments. The other key consideration is that to put a high school and a new rec center in an infill area, in the case of the existing Kate Andrews, it wouldn't fit, but just pretending for a moment that it would, you would lose the economic ripple effect created by a $50 million investment such as a joint high school rec center in an infilled area, such that additional land for growth and development wouldn't be realized in the same way that the other sites were located. So as Andrea pointed out, there isn't enough room once you look at the parking implications, the space requirements, the green space requirements, but also it would be lost economic energy that really doesn't benefit the taxpayer long term. Okay, so that was my best attempt at my accounting forecast. So I will introduce Kyle Beauchamp. He's our Director of corporate services, and what Kyle is going to do is look at the financial and economic considerations of the project as conceived at Site A and compare that to the other locations that were analyzed as part of this process. Kyle.
Okay, thanks, Caitlin. Good afternoon, everyone. So attached here is just a snapshot of the capital budget. So this was approved by Council on November 26, 2018. In this budget, there's been $5 million allocated for traffic lights, road, and sewer upgrades. So as Andre kind of talked about, the cost for Site A came out to $7.4 million. This includes a 20% contingency and full engineering cost. So the difference between that number and kind of the number in the budget is we've excluded engineering, as we're looking at doing in-house engineering to kind of mitigate some of those costs, as well as there's so much uncertainty with a contingency that's maybe a year or two out. The town's also currently exploring potential grants and funding from other sources, agencies, to kind of help with that cost. So just again for this, there's been some inaccurate conceptions about no amounts being budgeted for safety. This is to show that there's been $3 million budgeted for traffic, 1.5 for general roads, and $500,000 for general utilities. So with all the costs that Andrea talked about, how do we pay for them? Regardless of which site selected, there are substantial costs required. With these costs ranging from $7 to $15 million, the next question is, how does Coaldale pay for these? We've kind of identified 3 potential funding models for this. First being strategic business ventures, second taxes, and third off-site levies. So for Site A, the economic ripple effect from selecting Site A as the location of the proposed project are significant. This sets the stage for future growth of West Coaldale due to the natural flow of the existing utility infrastructure. This solution is not only beneficial from an engineering perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Using revenues from developments to pay for costs as they're incurred helps mitigate carrying those costs. Other alternatives lead to high upfront costs with lower immediate revenue to pay for those. Just leaves a financial burden on the residents of Coaldale to carry for years to come until that development is ready to pay for those costs. Through appraisal reports, real estate transactions, market reports, we've kind of estimated the funds that could be received from the 75 acres of selling to a developer of just shy of $9 million. So if Coaldale looks at developing that land, there are additional utility costs required to upsize that for residential development. So MPE Engineering has kind of estimated these costs at $2.7 million. So that's also being taken into consideration in this analysis of the sites. Site B and C. Site B requires the town to purchase additional land as it's not land currently owned. Site C is just enough land for the project of the 20 acres. Site B and C are the highest capital cost. While these sites would set Coaldale up for future development, it carries a significant financial burden for the residents of Coaldale, again, to carry for numerous years because we have to wait for that development and those levies to kind of pay for this. So the net effect of Site B and C is that there's no immediate funding model to pay for these costs compared to Site A. Site E and F, economically, E and F are the least viable of all the locations. When deciding on the location of a $50+ million investment, it's very crucial to consider the ripple effects and what that can do for the municipality. So, such as what future development can it promote, what are the future tax revenues it'll bring, and what model can we use to pay for those costs. Both of these sites are on the boundaries of Coaldale, with the neighboring lands outside the municipal boundaries, so it leaves little room for future development. As a result, the costs associated with building on these sites would be borne to the residents with no immediate funding model to pay, and limiting the ripple effects and the economic development that we can see after that. So kind of how do they stack up? So on the blue here, we have the cost for development of each of the site with the immediate funding model. Again, A is being the only immediate funding model to fund those. So you can kind of see how much that's going to cost compared to revenue. So basically, what's the net cost here? The net cost, again, you can see is A would be $1.1 million, B is $15.6 million, C is 12.4 million, E is 10.9 million, and site F is 7.4 million. Okay, taxes. So there's always a lot of misconceptions out there about what's this going to cost Coaldale for tax-wise. We're adding this, our tax is going to go up significantly. So this is just an example only. It doesn't reflect any planned changes in Coaldale's mill rate. So if we take all those previous costs I talked about and we assume the 10-year payback period, what's the net increase in tax that would have? Again, just a pure example. Site A would be 1.4%. Site B would be 19%. Site C would be 15%. Site E would be 13%, and Site F would be 9%. So we're already at a stage, you know, economic, political pressures, costs are going up. It's important to kind of spread our funding models, our revenue streams over various sites to help mitigate taxes. Just kind of a snapshot here of what's building on different sites, the tax effect it could have on Coaldale long term. So a little more about taxes. A municipality can increase their tax revenue in two different ways to pay for the services our residents use every day. The first is to increase our tax base of the municipality through smart development, getting more residents in Coaldale to share the cost. Or the second is just to increase the mill rate. Sites A, B, and C do have potential to increase Coaldale's tax base through future offsite development from the location. E and F don't have that same potential. An enhanced tax base allows Coaldale to invest more dollars into our community, while at the same time spreading the cost out to a larger number of residents, ultimately reducing the cost for all of Coaldale. So we talk about future development, residential development, what that brings. Site A, again, has 75 acres of available land that we could turn into residential development. Those 75 acres, it's estimated about 338 lots could be built. So using Coaldale's current mill rate, the municipal mill rate of just over 8 points, estimating based on the average property value in there, you can see the tax revenue that would be generated. So we go from an average house of $350,000, would be just shy of $1 million, to if it was an average of $500,000 a house, it would be north of $1.3 million. This is annual tax revenue Coaldale would receive from the future development. Just touched a little bit on offsite levies here. So growing northwest of Coaldale, Site A will create infrastructure required, but it's going to drive future development along West Highway 3 for, again, more commercial and residential. While the town is going to have to fund a portion of this cost up front, it's important that future developers are paying their share of this cost. So to ensure this, the town's offsite levy bylaw, and that it truly represents these costs, $60,000 has been allocated in the 2019-2021 operating budget to review this bylaw. This is expected to happen late 2019-2020. Excuse me. So I'm at the end here. Here's a summary for you to consider. No, not going to be able to do more. Okay. Thanks.
Kyle, any short questions to Kyle?
I got more of a comment. I just want to thank Kyle, and I appreciate how you've broken down the cost factors with each one of the sites that were looked at before a decision was made. And because everybody knows nobody hates paying taxes more than I do. But also I want to note that we don't make our decisions strictly on the funding. We do look at the best site, and we did look at the safety aspect of the site beforehand. And thank you very much for all your hard work in this, Kyle.
Okay, and Kalen, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kyle. And that concludes the formal presentation associated with agenda item 4.1. I would like to point out that the full staff report for this agenda item is posted on the town's website, But just a word of warning, the full staff report and corresponding appendices is over 600 pages in length. So if you plan to upload this document on your smartphones, just make sure your Wi-Fi feature is turned on. Once again, my appreciation goes out to staff for their hard work, not just in assembling the information for today's presentation, but for the total body of work that has gone into each of the three main aspects of this project over the past number of years. We've been studying the feasibility and infrastructure requirements of growing north, and all directions for that matter, since 2014. Cam did an excellent job reminding us of all the engagement efforts that have taken place as a way to identify the community's desire for a new multi-use recreation facility. I'd also like to thank Palliser School Division for recognizing Coaldale's population crunch and presenting the community with an innovative grade reconfiguration package that would see a new high school come to Coaldale. Without all the pre-work Town Council administration did on growth, infrastructure planning, and annexation, we may not have been ready for Palliser's innovative vision for students in Coaldale. Because of the excellent working relationship between the town and Palliser, we were able to roll up our sleeves and put together a once-in-a-generation opportunity for an innovative joint project. The one thing I'd like to end on is thanking Palliser. They're a bunch of doers this term and not talkers, and they like to roll up their sleeves, and that's shown through in our presentation with the province and the subsequent collaboration that's taken place from there. So at this time, I'd like to turn the discussion back over to Council.
Thank you, Kalen, and I want to reiterate all of Kalen's comments. And obviously today, a lot of the information is a reiteration, regurgitation, and representing all of the stuff that we had on file already. But it was done in a very, very comprehensive manner, and being able to access it all in one point, albeit many gigabytes of information if you want to download it, but I think it's very useful. And I want to also thank all the citizens that took the effort to engage with us much earlier in the process. There was a lot, Cam was very explicit in his going over the history, and there is quite evident that there was a lot of points of contact with the residents of Coaldale that were able to engage with council very early in the process, and we were able to do a lot of stuff, and so it's very much appreciated. I know it was a lot of work by everybody to represent all this stuff, so thanks again. And I think Councillor Chapman has his name on the queue, if I'm mistaken or not.
Very much, Your Worship, and members of council and visitors and guests in the gallery. I think before I present the motion, I'd like to read just a quick excerpt from a letter addressed to Mayor and Council. And you'll appreciate that from time to time and occasionally residents in our community write letters and emails to council on things that matter to them most. This particular letter was written by a student at our Kate Andrews High School, and although it may be directed more to our school board, and I'm glad that Dexter Durfee here is with us this afternoon, it does present some clear issues and this young man's vision for this school in Coaldale. Now, this letter was written about a year ago, so it's written as is. Dear Mayor Craig, I'm currently enrolled at Kate Andrews High School. I believe that everyone should have equal opportunities no matter who they are. And with that being said, I'm writing to you concerning the fact that Kate Andrews High School needs more funding. Upon enrolling at Kate Andrews School, along with my peers, I was excited for the school year. There would be dozens of options to choose from, and the school would be the state of the art. Well, 6 months later, I've been sadly disappointed. The school is not terrible by any means, but when compared to newer schools, it really does not stack up. Even though there are some programs involved, it is not enough, though. There's still little no options for students to choose from, and the ones that are available lack the equipment needed. And some examples include the drama room is small and has no room to act or perform. It's not only the extracurricular classes that need an upgrade, so do the classrooms. The walls are old and there are pieces of paint flaking off. Not to mention the fact that the school does not have an air conditioner, and in the winter the classrooms are freezing, and in the summer it's too hot. Now, Kate Andrews might have been new and innovating when it was created. That'd be 1959. But it is no longer, and this is part of the reason that students are flocking to other schools that are more advanced. Kate Andrews will fail in years to come if not provided more funding from the town. So I would like the town to provide Kate Andrews High School with more funding. And by doing so, the school will be able to create more extracurricular activities as well as to renovate the school over the summer break. That was his vision. And this will result in more students selecting Kate Andrews as their school of choice. And due to this, the school received more popularity as well as gain more students for years to come. And I will help to provide more funding by spreading awareness in our community and starting fundraisers. This will be advantageous for everyone involved. The school will be refitted as well as see a boost in students enrolled. The town will benefit by obtaining a newer school, and that will restore the town's educational reputation. The citizens will benefit by being able to send their children to an amazing school fitted with the best tools to give them the education they deserve. And everyone in the surrounding community will benefit if the town provides Kate Andrews with more funding. With that, Your Worship, I'd like to provide a motion. And this motion is as follows. That council move to uphold the joint high school, grades 7 through 12, multi-use recreational facility project site that was approved in the 2019 to 21 capital project or budget, and to direct administration to take steps to proceed with the following. First of all, to design and construction of the multi-use recreational center in the southeast portion of the town-owned parcel of land legally described as Southwest 15-9-20 west of 24, which is subdivisions 3 and 6. Secondly, continued collaboration with Alberta Transportation and CP Rail on the design and construction of a fully signalized intersection at the intersection of Highway 3 and 30th Street, as well as the installation of safety fence along the Highway 3 corridor. Thirdly, to design and construction of paved and detached pathways along 30th Street, 18th Avenue, and 16th Avenue, as well as the addition of at-grade pedestrian crossing improvements. Further, that council direct administration to undertake in tandem with the Palliser Regional School Division and the town's architectural design consultants, community consultation initiatives to determine the amenities to be included in the multi-use recreation facility.
So you took the initiative to write down the motion, so that's good. You can probably hand that to Lana to save her the trouble of typing it, but I appreciate your taking the initiative to write that motion out. Council, are you clear on the motion, or do you need it read back, or? Okay. So we have a motion by Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So now I have a little bit of a question for council. It is going on to 420, and we have the ground, the sod turning at the 4:45, but they want us to be there before 4:45, obviously. So we can try and get through the next bits of information in the next 10 minutes, or we may have to recess. What does council feel? Can we deal with the agenda, or do we need to recess? Drive through? Okay. All right. So then, thank you, everybody. And 7.1, we have Settler Days. So we have Cindy Hoffman there. She provided the Settler Day update. And so not to short shift her too much. We won't give her too much of a speaking role right now. If any questions or comments that you would want to present with Cindy? If you wanted to make any kind of quick notes or comments, you're more than welcome to.
No, I just wanted to just make council aware of what we're doing, what the committee's doing. I think you've got it in front of you. We're pretty excited. Things are falling into line, and I think we're on track. So, yeah, if anybody has any questions or anything, you're more than welcome to contact me anytime. So,
Okay, so my peripheral vision was not good, so between Roger and Councillor Chapman, who is first? Go ahead, Roger.
The only thing I have to say, I've read your report here. Very good. Thank you very much. You mentioned that you were going to be hand delivering letters to
yes,
the mobile home park beside the quads for the fireworks.
we're going to be notifying
Or
them. I
notifying
don't know
them directly,
the mode.
however it's going to be done.
Yes, yeah.
I would strongly suggest you also notify the people around 13th Street and 11th Street in those areas also, because if we're going to be having fireworks at both Taylor Mountain and in the quads, those are they're going to be awfully close together, and a lot of people like myself might have to move a dog out of town for the evening. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just as a quick update, we had an emergency management meeting, emergency services meeting on Friday. We have decided we're going to have not two sites. It's just going to be the one site out at the quads. So it'll just make it easier for emergency services, fire department, everything. So.
And then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Cindy, thanks for this report. And just maybe one quick comment about the luncheon hosted by Mayor Craig to all the dignitaries that will be attending. You'll add that into your itinerary?
If you'd prefer, this is like on our website right now, so it's
this will be
for the general
private, more
public,
private stuff.
and this is
Okay.
more of just a.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's up. If you'd like me to, I could sure include it, but otherwise,
No.
I think it's just more of a
I think
private
this-
20-minute type of luncheon. So
Yeah. I think this is more for council's awareness that there would be a luncheon for the
Yes.
dignitaries hosted by the mayor.
yes,
Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Then my computer crapped out on me, so is there a recommendation just to receive for info or?
Yeah, for me, I think it was just more information for you.
Council
But
review the schedule and so, I guess receive for information would be appropriate. Thank you, Councillor Holm. Any discussion? All in favor? Again, thank you, Cindy, and your many volunteers and participants. That's awesome work. And then Kyle. Do you have your voice back?
It's not too lost. So, okay,
And your report was in the package as well. And so any highlights? And go for it.
Yeah, so we just have the tendering purchasing policy. So we're continually reviewing our processes, what we're doing at the town. From corporate services side, we're looking at previous policies. How can we update them, make sure they're efficient, that we're properly following them so they're effective for the town. So the purchasing policy is just one you have in front of you. We've made some clerical changes, some changes noted in the policy. If there's any questions from council, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Any questions through to Kyle on the purchasing policy? Thank you very much for preparation of this, and it's quite good work on that. So, does anybody care to make a motion to adopt the new revised purchasing policy here? Councillor Lloyd moves that the council approve the tendering and purchasing policy ARG 023. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. And then the respectful workplace policy, Kyle?
So the responsibility and accountability for a respectful workplace is shared. This policy will clearly outline the expectations for the provision of a workplace that is respectful, dignified, fair, and free from inappropriate and disrespectful behavior. This policy applies to all Town of Coaldale employees, volunteers, contractors, elected officials, visitors, and business partners, and also conforms with the Alberta Human Rights Act, as well as the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act code and requirements. Any employee who violates this policy would be subject to appropriate discipline which may include but not limited to denial of participation in certain events, refusal to access people and workplaces, and termination of employment. Members of the public, visitors to town facilities, and individuals conducting business in the town of Coaldale are expected to treat the town's employees and representatives respectfully. This includes refraining from inappropriate behavior towards town of Coaldale employees, elected officials, volunteers, contractors, and business partners. If inappropriate behavior occurs, the town will take appropriate action to ensure a respectful workplace. This could include barring individuals from accessing town facilities and people, legal action, and or discontinuing businesses with contractors and suppliers. I do have the policy attached, followed by, we did do up a zero tolerance notice that I would like to have displayed at all town facilities as a quick summary of this policy.
Well, thank you very much for preparing that, and council is well aware that when we're setting policies and making decisions, that it's difficult, if not impossible, to satisfy and make everybody in Coaldale happy with the decisions that we make, but it's totally unacceptable for anybody to vent those displeasures at our staff members, and I'm glad that you drafted up a zero tolerance policy with respect to that, because it's quite reprehensible that individuals might take liberties to enter into one of our work sites and cause anxiety and fear for our workers. So this is a very timely piece of work that you've done, and I want to appreciate it, and I want all staff to know that council is firmly behind them in their carrying out of their work duties, and that we do strongly endorse the fact that they should not be subjected to any abusive behavior. Any other discussion or comments? Councillor Avery?
Well, thank you, Worship. Just to reiterate what the mayor is saying, this is a great policy. The only thing I was wondering, we got social. Should we put cyber in there as well? Because with some of the recent events that have happened with some of the town employees and stuff that's been in print about them, just add cyber in there, just to cover all our employees from any type of bullying that can occur.
Yep, we'll make that change.
Thank you.
And could we get a motion to approve the
I'll make that motion.
as amended, and that would also include the ability to post the policy within the work sites as well. Councillor Avery makes that motion then. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And then, so then we have the 8.1, the library report that was handed in, and I think the only thing that maybe is 8.3, the Alberta Capital Finance one that you put in there. Does council want to direct the administration to come up with any innovative strategic borrowing options? Or do we want to table this to the next meeting? I mean, okay, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Chapman makes a motion to table to our next meeting.
Just a quick question through to council. We can certainly table that. Would it be worth staff's time in the meantime to add more details to this? It would help if we had a little bit of a sense on whether this is worth time between now and next council meeting.
I don't know how much depth you really want to go into. I think the mayor can speak to it really better than anybody.
Well, it takes some time to, Kyle, go ahead.
Just touch base on it. We've just been tracking interest rates on borrowing, interest rates we're earning on our investments. Right now, interest rates for borrowing short term are significantly low. They're below 2%. They're below what we're earning on our current investments, GICs. What this proposal would be looking at capital projects that we've budgeted to pay out of reserves and look at short-term borrowing for those projects instead. The rationale being we can borrow for those projects at a lower rate than we can use that money to earn more revenue on our GICs and investments. That's what that would entail.
Okay, okay, so from council would appreciate just a shallow dive into some of that. Then don't spend a lot of energy, just elaborate on what you've already said. And we have the motion to table, so offered by Councillor Chapman. All in favor? And that's carried. And So then we'll receive a motion to receive 8.1 and 8.3 for information. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? And then we have 10.1, the correspondence. Receive that for information. Councillor Holm, all in favor? And then 11.1, Coaldale Healthcare Center, that was sent out. It doesn't really evidence any change in service levels or anything. So a motion to receive that for information. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. And 8.2, yeah, receive 8.2 for information. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Okay. And we've dealt with everything. And Kaylin, do you have any CAO report that we have to come back for, or? Okay.
Not anymore.
All right. So a motion to amend the budget to delete agenda for to delete 12.2, I guess, or well, we don't have a. I guess we can just declare that there's no CAO report and go ahead.
I should just clarify that there are items in the report, but nothing that can't be dealt with at the next council meeting.
Okay. So maybe a motion to table 12.2 to the next meeting then. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Okay. And motion to adjourn. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? There.